Welcome to Cybelec training, Introduction to Cybtouch.
This is the complete range of our Cybtouch controller. We start from the bottom here with the Cybtouch 8P. P in the Cybelec language is used for conventional machines. Those machines are not synchronized, which means they don't have Y1, Y2. They have mechanical stops. Most of them, some don't have many mechanical stops. They have a beam, but the way to manage the beam is only with binary valve, so either open or closed. Those Cybtouch are for 2 or 3 axes. So this is the entry range controller of Cybelec for conventional machines. Then we have Cybtouch 8 PSE. PS stands for synchronized press brake, which means in that case we have Y1, Y2. So we synchronize the beam with 2 cylinders, and we also manage one electrical axis being X-axis. So that's the baggage front and back. There is then the Cybtouch 8 PS, which is for the same type of machine, for the same press brake, but it can go up to 4 axes. I will go into detail in all those Cybtouch a bit later on. If you have some interrogation, I might answer them a bit later on. Note that Cybtouch 8PSE and 8PS is a different hardware, which means we have a different number of input-output, and this hardware is only for 3 axes, and this one can be for 3 or 4 axes, being Y1, Y2, X, and R. So as we have still people joining the meeting, then we are on the Cybtouch 12, which has a larger screen, much more comfortable to use, especially for the end user to program. Per default, 4 axes, and it has more options. We'll get to that a bit later on. We have the vertical or the horizontal versions. And then the last range of the Cybtouch is the Cybtouch 15. And we have 2 models, the 15PSE, E for economical, and Cybtouch 15PS. The difference, as you can see, it's the number of input-output, but the software, the HMI, is similar. Also, one good point about all the Cybtouch, the programming environment is exactly the same. It's similar on all Cybtouch. And the wizard, what we call wizard, is auto-tuning of the electrical axis or the beam. Those are exactly similar on all the Cybtouch, and later on the VisiTouch controller. Today we will not talk about VisiTouch controller or VisiPack controller. Those are the higher range controllers. This is another presentation, another meeting that will come in about 2 weeks. Cybtouch 15 is per default 4 axis, but it can go up to 6 axis when we add this input-output module. So depending on the need, if you need to retrofit a machine or if you need to make a machine, you can use either Cybtouch. Of course, they have a different price and a different number of input-output. It's according to your needs. Now I will go a little bit more into details about each of the Cybtouch. So the first one will be the Cybtouch 8P for conventional press brake. What we call conventional are not synchronized press brake. This is an example. Here we have a mechanical stop on both sides of the cylinder. We will move this mechanical stop with the motor. We call this the Y-axis. So first we move this mechanical stop in the cylinder, and then with digital outputs we activate valve to move the beam and to to go until this stop, which is the BDC, the bottom dead center, where the beam is in order to bend. And then we go back up. So those are the conventional type of press brake. We manage the P, PC, and PL. I'll get to that a bit later. It's fully touchscreen, 8 inches screen, and we have 2 or 3 axes. So that's depending on your need. If you have the PC type, you will need 3 axes. Now, what are those modes? We have P, PC, and PL. PL. This is a machine mostly made in the USA. We have a lean encoder here in order to know exactly where the beam is. And when we press the pedal, we will provide the movement for the beam with only digital outputs. So there are no servo valves, there are no proportional valves here to open here the cylinder, or to put the oil here in the cylinder. We only have digital outputs. And to know where the beam is, we have one linear encoder. That's what we call PL. P now, it's as shown a bit before. We move first this mechanical stop at the correct position, and then we open the valve and put the pressure here, so it goes down on the mechanical stop. To know where the beam is, we have switches. This is TDC, so the top dead center, and high speed, low speed, the speed change points. And then we can have different switch for example, the back gauge of traction or the bottom dead center. This is what we call P type press. And then PC is the same as the P, except we remove the switches here and we add a linear encoder. With this, we are more precise to know where the beam is. Of course, the bottom dead center, the beam will anyway go into mechanical on the mechanical stop. So we reach the precision with first positioning the electrical axis. Then we have a SIP-Touch 8, 12, and 15 for synchro press brake. We synchronize in this case Y1, Y2. The first SIP-Touch will be the SIP-Touch 83 PSE or 84 PS. We manage Y1, Y2 X or Y1, Y2 XR in the case of the 84 PS. So X is the front and back axis, and R will be the up and down axis for the back gauge. And those two axes form the back gauge where you put the machine, the metal sheet. We have in both cases 8 inputs, 13 outputs. And in both of the SIP-Touch, we have the possibility to have a USB transfer. It is useful when you want to make a backup of the machine parameters. You just plug in the key and take the backup. Or for the end user, you can take the parts on USB. So either save the part on USB, or from the offline software, you can export the parts to the SIP-Touch using the USB key. If you do several machine startup and use the same tool, you can also transfer the tooling using this key. Now, with the SIP-Touch 8, we have different options. First of all, will be the 2D graphical. So the standard SIP-Touch, per default, it's only numerical programming. We will program an angle, we will program the tooling, we will program the back gauge position, and then press start, all the axes go into position, and we can bend. With the 2D graphical, we can design a profile. So we will draw the profile on the screen, and we will then select the bending order manually. And all the axis position will then be calculated. If we don't want to set the bending order manually, we have this option, automatic bending sequence, which will add a button on the SIP-Touch, and when you press on this button, it will calculate the bending sequence, which means in which order we will bend the product and how if we flip the product, if we rotate the products, and so on, in order to avoid collision between the products, the tooling, the punch, the die, and the machine frame. All this in 2D. The third option is the working time restriction. Of course, depending on the law of your countries, this option will let you block the machine. Let's say after a few months, if you rent a machine and after 3 months the machine should not be used, you can set a code, and after 3 months the machine will be blocked. So that's an option that could be useful. We have then the tandem, which let us put two tandem, so two zip touch in tandem, in order to have two press brake and to have those press brake next to each other in order to bend together, to bend very long parts of sheets. The communication between the two zip touch in this case is using CAN technology. So we communicate between the two zip touch with only one cable, and we synchronize both beam of both press brake with this CAN communication. Then the zip touch 12. As mentioned, and as you can see, the screen is larger, so the user friendliness is better. It's easier to program on this zip touch, and especially when you have to access parameters with the fingers, it's easier. So 12 inches screen, and per default Y1, Y2, X, and R. So 4 axis per default. Then here, similar as the zip touch 8. So 8 input, 13 output. Those are digital input-output, USB transfer. Then the option 2D graphical is included, which means the zip touch 12 per default has the possibility to design parts in 2D. Those three options, which are the same as the zip touch 8, automatic bending sequence, working time restriction, and tandem, those options are similar as the zip touch 8. I did not mention, but you can also purchase the option later on, which means you have bought the zip touch, you install the zip touch on the machine, and the end user wants to have the automatic bend sequence. In this case, you order the option directly to Cybelec, to sales department, and they will send you a code to unlock this option on the zip touch. So the end user on his side only needs to enter a code, a license, and this option will be unlocked. Then we have the zip touch 15 PSE, so E stands for economical, and 15 PS. The difference between those two controllers is the number of input-outputs and, of course, the price. So depending, again, on your needs on the machine, you can choose whichever zip touch you need. This controller per default is 4-axis, which means Y1, Y2, X, R. We also have the possibility to add Z1, Z2, which are the lateral axes that will move from left to right when you stand in front of the machine. But to do so, we need the MVA. This MVA is an additional module, input-output module, that will be located in the electrical cabinets. And we will wire the beam to this MVA, which means we will manage Y1, Y2 directly with the MVA, and all the electrical axis with the zip touch. We have here on this zip touch included the 2D graphical, which means it's a graphical per default. It's a graphical controller, and the zip touch 15 PS has the automatic bending sequence included. The last two options remain optional. That's how to wire the zip touch 15 for 6 axes. We will have here all the electrical axes, X, R, Z1, Z2, wired directly on the hardware zip touch. And here, this little device will be the CBMVA, will be in the electrical cabinet. We have CAN communication between those two, and it will manage Y1, Y2, the pressure, and the grounding. Now we have different types of Cybelec because we have different requests from customers. Some customers are doing retrofit and they want to keep the amplifier in the electrical cabinet, so they only want analog outputs from the Cybelec. That's possible. In this case, we will use the Cybelec AA2. This Cybelec has analog outputs. So when I say analog outputs, I mean plus to minus 10 volt outputs from the SIP-Touch, from the actually Cybelec, directly to the so that we have two possibilities here. It can be directly to the amplifier, and the amplifier will manage the coils of the valves. Or if the customer use Bosch Rexroth with integrated amplifier, in this case, we also need direct analog outputs. So in this case, we'll use this MVA AA2. Note that we also have current output for pressure and grounding. So even with this MVA, we can still manage directly the valves of the pressure and the grounding. The other possibilities is the MVA FA2 in order to manage proportional valves. For example, Herberger. This MVA have current outputs, and we will directly wire the MVA to the coils of the valves. Therefore, we will directly move the coils and manage, if necessary, we can manage also the feedback. We have this inside the VDD card, so we have the feedback that will be wired directly on the MVA. So this MVA is more like an amplifier. And as well, we can manage the pressure and the grounding in current. The SIB MVA, this is how it looks like. We have two models. The compact model, this is the top view, and here the front view. And we have the multi model, which is a larger MVA. In this case, for SIP-Touch, we will not use this larger module. We will use it for VisiTouch, because with this module, we have more input-output, and we can also manage electrical access. So here we have different cards to manage up to 8 electrical access. Now this MVA, you can connect with the laptop on it, and you can set the current. We have nominal current, we have maximum current of the valve, so that is mostly when you use the same CBMVA as an amplifier with current outputs. We have this software, and you can connect from your laptop directly to the MVA with the USB cable. And then you have this software where you can set up the nominal and maximum current of the valve, Y1, Y2, for the pressure, for the grounding. And if you have Herberger, for example, with LVDT feedback, you can also do the auto scaling of the valves. We deliver CBMVA with also default parameters for the valve. So you can also load different parameters from this software.